So again, welcome everyone. Good morning and good evening to our speaker. Okay, so in today's session, we'll be exploring practical strategies for building resilience, improving communications, and fostering collaborations within developer teams. I could say much a lot of our tech talk, but I think our speaker would be the very best person to do that. And our speaker today is Tim Benniks. He is a developer experience lead at Content Stack, bringing brings years of experience in developer relations, community building, and content creation. So he'll share valuable insights on creating environments where developers can truly succeed and grow. So without any further ado, Tim, I'll let you lead now. Thank you. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. That was a lovely intro. And it seems like we're actually recording because Jacob was also ready to say, let's spin up some OBS and see what happens. But I think we're good. So let me just share my screen here and then we can get started. So this is like I'm a developer type person, right? So we always like, if you're a developer, you like to be like creating frameworks and stuff. And so this is not exactly a developer framework, but this is a framework on how teams can behave together to have much better outcomes when things get complicated. And right now you're students or graduates, but you'll learn probably the hard way when you start your first job that not everything is like easy, fast, move smoothly, even if you use AI, right? So there's always going to be tensions and situations. And so because of that, after all this experience that I've had, I created this framework. So basically, this is a framework to lead a team to success in high pressure environments. And what those are, we'll talk about today, right? And so why did I actually create this? Well, as it turns out, like the ability to produce really good tech in a high pressure environment is directly dependent on how your team is organized. That might sound a little bit boring because you just want to be coding, right? But that just want to be coding only works when this organization is there, right? And especially when your team is remote. And so my name is Tim Benniks, just like was just introduced. And so I work at Content Stack, which is basically a piece of software. It's like a platform for content. And so we built something called digital experience platforms. So basically the biggest companies in the world that you will know that I cannot really name today, but they will be using our type of software to do personalization, to do e-commerce stores, to do search, a whole bunch of different things that together make an experience of you buying shoes, for example, to be really great. And there I lead developer experience. So if you use our software and you're using our SDKs and APIs and CLIs, that's the stuff I focus on to make developers happy, essentially. And so in that same space, I'm also an ambassador for a whole bunch of different companies that work in that same space. And I just put a little picture of me speaking at a conference because I've done that all along, having worked at companies. I always love to do that. And so you might think, why is this accent of this guy so strange? And that's because I grew up in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, which is this picture, and also with, of course, Dutch cheese. But I live in France, where we have French cheese, but I work with Americans, which also have a type of cheese. And so when you merge all that together, then you get me. And so over time, I've had a career of over 20 years. I have been working with brands like these, and I've been very fortunate that at that time, these brands spent a ton of money in having ad agencies and tech shops build their experiences. And so from working with all these type of customers, from small to very large, I've started to see patterns and learn kind of if I behave a certain way as a leader or as a developer or as a team, I get more success. And so I've tried to distill all that information into this talk track. And so if anybody has any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to just put them in the chat and we can just answer at that moment if it fits the context. And so I wanted to kind of align this story with Star Trek, and that probably dates me a little bit. But they were basically the original agile teams, right? Of course, this is from the 90s. This is these are horrible pictures, but that's why it's extra fun to put those in a talk track like these. So in Star Trek, if you don't know, they're basically just flying out to unknown planets. They send small teams to a planet and just do stuff. They don't know what they're going to see. They don't know what cultures are going to be there. They don't know if they're going to be attacked. So they're like the original teams that deal with high pressure, right? So I thought this is a lovely narrative to put in here. And so in your projects that you're going to work in when you start to get a job, there's a bunch of different errors and problems you're going to see. Or let's call them challenges, right? And so there's quite often different expectations between what your client or customer or product owner, that's what PO means, um, have versus what you think you're going to be building. Or your customer might be very immature and not really knowing what that tech is that you're building at all. And so they have different motivations of why they want something from the people that built them. And so those are always problematic areas, right? And so there's also always this pressure that you feel from either your own management or from your client or for the people that ask you to build this thing. But as it turns out, especially teams of producing people like tech people, that pressure might be perceived based on your own ideas of what you have to deliver. And that's a really interesting problem that you, if you didn't have that, it would be so much easier, right? And so there's also many different ways of measuring what quality is. Is quality something that has no bugs? Or is quality something that is basically just on time? Or is quality something that's super expensive or really like in budget? Like there's so many different ways to say this is finished and is it good or not, right? And you might also feel like you're not helping at all, but in the end, you might be helping a lot. Or you feel like what you do gives a lot of value, but your customer has no idea what you're doing, so they actually don't care, right? So there's all these little things that can go wrong, and together, right, you get problems, right? And so you also have potential cultural differences. Like for example, I am from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, which is the most direct country in the world. I will just tell you if I don't like your sweater and mean nothing bad by it. We are super like that, super direct. Where now I live in France, where that doesn't happen. If I do that, somebody cries or wants to hit me, right? You can never say that. And so now consider that you might be working with folks in India, in the US, in Mexico. Those three are so different. You're going to see problems in how you communicate. And that's a pretty big part of this talk track as well. And then, of course, remote work has different expectations. Some companies expect you to just do your 9 to 5 and always be online and then move your cursor, or we will think you don't do work, where others really don't care as long as the work is done. Those are really big differences. So, all those things together give you this, right? Everybody who's ever had to produce something for a customer that pays feels these things. And we want to not feel those because if you don't do that, it will make you unhappy. And unhappy people will build low quality stuff because they stop caring or it just doesn't work or takes too long. You want your team to be happy. And hopefully today will prepare you for when you enter the workforce to just highlight and see things happen and see, hey, I heard about that. Let's see what you can do about it. Right. So before you even start doing anything, you have to deal with these problems. Right. And so the most interesting part here is that your team actually overcomes these challenges. It's not just the leader. The leader has very specific things they need to be doing, but you only really get there together, right? And so when the team has a well organization that's right and it has the right attitude, you really have the right tools and confidence to just deal with all these common issues. And then you get this, because when you search for Star Trek stuff from the 90s, you get like the worst type of images. And so this is just good fun. So you'll see throughout this slide deck that I just found the most horrific images from those 90s shows and I put them in. And I still love them, by the way. So, anyways, I call this framework for how we behave team first. And so let's just have a look what these rules help you with to be successful, right? And all of this stuff is anecdotal evidence because I've done this for like 20 years with the biggest customers and the biggest clients in the world with the highest demand. And I'm bald for a reason because I've learned a lot, but it's also really hard stuff. And even in your entry level job, you're going to see a bunch of this stuff. And so just hopefully this helps you. So there's a split into three parts for this setup, right? Team First has three categories. First, how do you behave when you are a leader? But if you're not a leader yet, this will help you to identify what good leaders do. Then, as a developer, so this is you. Either you don't have to be a developer. This can also be an AI prompter. This can also be a copywriter, or this can be a researcher. Anybody who is an individual contributor in a team, basically. I just use the word developer because this is a tech academy and I work with tech teams mainly. And you have the team, right? How do you behave as a team together to get the best stuff? Right. Of course, there's always overlap because leaders can also be developers, which is basically me. I am now, because of my age and my history, I'm kind of normally put as the leader position, but I love to code. And it's mainly what I do. But then you can also see that developers can step up and be leaders. It's a really important distinction here that everybody is basically the same. And based on how things work in your team, some people can step up in certain items and other people in others. So interpret these rules basically as you see fit to your context, right? This can also fit with at school if you have like a group activity. These things also apply there. And this is such a bad image, but so fun. Anyways, let's talk about what leaders have to do, in my opinion, to be successful. Right? And the most important part as a leader is to make your team feel responsible for the things that they do. And you can imagine if you feel responsible for your work and then you start doing a great job because it's your responsibility, right? And how do you get people to do that? Like, how do you get people to feel responsible? And some of those things will be open doors. I'm going to be Captain Obvious here, but I have to say them because so many leaders don't do these things, right? This is actually not that easy. And so, what you do is these three things combined make people feel responsible. So you provide trust, overview, and growth opportunities. So let's talk about trust for a sec, right? So you have to trust your team. The root of the culture of a leader is that there is trust throughout the team. If there's no trust, you didn't create the right team or you're not a good leader. And of course, if trust is, of course, earned, there's a little bit of work to be done. You cannot trust instantly. But over time, trust needs to be the root of your culture. Because when you trust your people, they will trust you that you do the right thing for them. So if you come up and see a leader who is always anxious about what people do or start, not giving them freedom or start micromanaging, you'll know there's no trust and you're not in the right place. Right. And so you have to give people the freedom to be responsible. Right. You should give direction, but never micromanage. This is such a big, important part of giving people trust and letting them actually develop their own sense of responsibility. If I'm on holiday, I know and trust that my team knows what to do. I will never tell them what to do or check in. Of course, I will be online, and if they have a question, of course, they're always going to ask. I'm totally cool with that as a leader unless I say, okay, this is my 1 week I'm off, I'll just take it off. But I will never log in and ask, what are you doing? How did you do that? Did you commit this? Blah, blah. Never. That is not something that works. And the more freedom you give people to develop themselves, figure out stuff that they like, they get much more responsible. And also, all these things go into the same thing. Let them manage their own time. Because if you work from home or you're studying your way, some people learn by going to a talk track like this, right? Other people learn by reading. Other people learn by talking to ChatGPT. There's many different ways. And the same goes for work. Like I work from home and I start relatively late and I work relatively late also. And for me, that's just something that works. I want to be able to walk my dogs and take my wife who's in a wheelchair to the doctor once in a while. And if you let people do that and they feel responsible and they have the freedom and we don't micromanage, they will rise up to the occasion instantly. So this is an important part, trust. So next important part is overview. It is really important as a leader to teach overview of what other people in different teams do. The more you know about what others do, the more you know what your responsibility for your job is, but also how you impact others, right? So once people know what like how, let's say let's stay with this one for a sec. Let's say I'm building a feature in some code base, but I don't update the work ticket for it. I'm sure you all have heard about like ticket systems like GitHub issues or maybe Jira tickets, things like that. Other people in your team depend on those moving to a different state. So if I take my Jira ticket and I don't say I'm working on it, or I don't say I finished it, but I did finish the work, my QA person that has to test this code doesn't know you finished it because you didn't actually put it to another state. And you have now impacted their work. They might wait, they don't know what to do. Maybe if you don't update it and a graph doesn't show something, some leader somewhere else explodes because they don't see progress, right? So the moment you know what people depend on and what they do, it starts to get really interesting to know what you have to do yourself. And so leaders have to teach what everybody does. Wouldn't it be nice to know if you know what your product owner actually did, or your QA person, or your designer? Why do they design that way when I just can code it this way? Well, if you know, you're much more considerate about their feelings, the facts, decisions are made. Anyways, um, this one is also very interesting because especially when you're a tech person, you have ideals and ideas on what you want to do, right? People want to go in a certain direction. They love media, so they want to learn how to create AI videos and then serve them on the web with their own app or whatever, anything. People have these ideas that they want to do when I join a team. The thing is, as a leader, you should definitely never say, no, you cannot do that. What you should do is actually ask them, what is your passion? What is the thing you want to do? Why do you want to code it that way? Why do you want to have that big kind of architecture? And then once people have laid out their ideas, you then guide them to what the collective needs. Because more often than not, you only have 3 weeks left. Or there are certain decisions made by your customer CEO that just forces you to do something a certain way. And so by as a leader asking what people want and then somehow guide everybody towards the same goal, that really helps with the overview of what this project actually is. And then people take more responsibility again. And so there's a few other things in this category, like grind and glory. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this, but especially when I worked at ad agencies, what we used to see is that a creative director pitches an idea to, let's say, Nike or some huge company that has a lot of visibility, right? And let's say this all works out. The team works day and night for like 4 months to get something done. And then once it's time for award season or the customer takes you out to dinner or whatever, then that creative director takes all the glory, right? But they didn't have that grind or that the whole team went through. And so what is really important is that you understand that the grind is 99% of the work. The glory is 1%. So interestingly, that 1% feels in worth the same as that 99% of work. So as a leader, if you've seen that somebody worked their butt off to do all these crazy complicated things, give them that 1% of glory because it feels like the 99% of that, the work of the weight of the grind. So really give glory where it is deserved. If you're able to do that as a leader, it speaks very highly of you. And so even if people in this room are not leaders yet, look at if leaders that you work with do these kind of things, and you will notice how great they are if they do. And so then the final part is actually foster growth with everybody. If you let people champion subjects that they love, they will grow like crazy. This is the best, 10xing a developer you can by just making them excited by something. And that can be many things. I noticed this for myself, where, for example, this is a little bit more back in the day, but like I really enjoyed doing things like with media, images, and video on the web. But in that time, just a video player on a browser didn't really exist. And so I went in. I loved figuring out, okay, I need like this type of code to write a video player that plays this type of file on that type of browser. And then all the other browsers have fallback features. And what, like, I don't have to go too deep now because you're probably too young to know why we had to do that back then. It just works now. But that allowed me to champion that subject. And then I went in and I was, there are companies that build video players that saw my knowledge and helped me to be an advocate for them, helped me to, be on stage and talk about it. But also all my teammates came to me and asked questions when they had to do something with video or images or lazy loading or whatever. And so you learn how to teach others. You learn how to, give support, write documentation, know everything about a subject, become more T-shaped, right? So you go quite deep in the stem of the T about that one subject, but on the sides, you are also learning how to explain it, subject matter expert things, all that stuff. So let people champion something that they love within the context of project. It's really important. And also, I am always, if somebody built something and they want to show it, they show it. And if they win, it's their win. If they lose, they might not have understood the assignment. Of course, I'll be in the room as a leader to help them if it goes wrong. Customers will never be mad at them. They will be mad at me, of course. But you have to experience it, right? You know what it means when you sit in front of a CEO and you show something and it's not what they expected, or it's exactly what they expected. You learn a lot from that. And then finally, bottom up all the things. Me as a leader, I don't know how you're coding that very specific thing. You know, right? Or how to use AI a certain way to actually make it do the stuff that you want it to. That's for you to know and for a leader to just accept. And if you bottom up, so not top down, me as a leader saying, do all this, because at one point I had like 1,200 developers under me. I'm not going to tell them what to do. They'll know. And you'll see patterns arrive if the bottom up approach, when you have the freedom to be responsible and open and try stuff, you'll see cool stuff come up. Oh, this is one of the fun gives. You can see the low quality of the 90s gives, right? Anyways, so let's talk about the individual contributors. And by the way, if there's any questions, feel free to just ask, or if I go too fast or anything, whatever you want. So let's talk about developers, right? The most important part for developers is to actually know yourself. What do you like? What can you do? All that stuff. But also have this helicopter view. And I'll talk about what that is because that's really important. And so you really need to figure out your motivation. And this might even help you in school if you're not graduated yet, right? So super important. There's actually more than these, but these are the ones that fit work most likely. So there's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy means that you can choose yourself what you want to do. Mastery is that you master the skills that you have or the things that you have to do, you have mastery over them. And purpose is that you have a goal and understand that goal and feel like, I like this goal. If those three, and then eventually salary and things like this, if they're aligned, developers are very happy. Like, this really works. But just imagine if one of those three is not great. Let's say you are the creator of React.js or of a Python library or whatever you guys use, I don't know. And imagine you probably have autonomy. Oh, let's think, what is a good situation here? Let's say you're the builder of React.js, right? And so let's say you have mastery and purpose, because purpose for React.js is this is an open source library for reactive HTML generation and interactive JavaScript. My goal is to make that the easiest for everybody in the world. And then you might have the mastery because you're an incredible developer. But what if you have to do this in a system where there are rules, so you don't have the autonomy to actually make decisions that are best for React.js. Well, when that autonomy is taken away from you, you're not going to probably finish this project at all, right? Or what if in that same context you might have the autonomy and the mastery, but the purpose is away because nobody uses your software at all. Like they don't care. They haven't seen your GitHub repository. They don't watch your videos. So you might have built the most amazing piece of software, but nobody cares. You're just going to stop at one point. And so I can keep giving you examples of this, even in school, right? If you um, really don't have the mastery over something, but you have a goal and you have autonomy, it's pretty hard to get that mastery in. So know yourself, figure out why do you like not like this is the thing. Developers, like I've been one, but I've seen so many when we were still mostly in office that developers are like fuming at their screens. They're upset and like they don't know why, but they're upset. And this is what developers tend to be. We're never really happy. And so what I'm trying to always do is kind of figure out which of those three parts are not in the right place. And what I've learned is if you have a good manager or a good boss or a good leader, and you have figured out one of those three things that's not correct in your job right now, when you just explain that and say what you want, you tend to get what you want. If you just go there and say, I'm upset, blah, 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 you don't get anything. But if you explain these three, you know where it's lacking, and you say, I need this and this to be there so I can be better at my job, I can guarantee you, you will get it. Provided you have a good leader, of course. Um, Another one, that's a super fun one. So use agile workflow processes and weaponize them. Like, I'm not sure you have learned this yet, but when you're in your workplace, they always say, yeah, we're agile, right? We do Scrum and we have sprints and we have retrospectives and blah, 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 all that fancy agile stuff, right? A lot of people just get annoyed by it. But actually, what you need to realize is that if you understand it, you can weaponize it. Because you, as a developer, when you say, I commit to this for this sprint, you have to finish it. That's the point, right? If you have, as a team, figured out these are the things we're going to do this 2-week sprint, the point of agile is that you actually finish, which means if you say I did too much, well, you have to work your evenings because you commit, right? That's the way this works. However, if your boss or some customer just gives you this huge feature that you can never build on time, you can just say no because you cannot commit to this in one sprint. You know what you can do and what you cannot do. And so you can really weaponize these moments. And right, if you have a retrospective meeting where you talk about how something went, you can just say that was bad. You were bad. Don't do that again. And you can weaponize that. It's really important to understand processes like that. And then as a developer as well, champion the subjects you like, right? Like I just explained about that video and image stuff, that got me really far in my career. And I'm doing it at the moment as well. Like I really enjoy vibe coding, for example. And I'm more of a coder vibe coding than like a designer, like with, V0 or Bolt or stuff, but I'm more like in the code editor. And I'm doing it so much. I'm building like so many things. My colleagues are starting to see me as somebody who knows something about this. And soon I'll be teaching my coworkers how they could do it. And after that, I'll be on a conference stage somewhere. And then somebody from Vercel talks to me, on and on. If you champion something, you get a lot of excitement from it from yourself. You might start to want to write about it and people start reading it, see you as a leader. You can make your own, how you are seen by others. You can make that really good. You can curate how you are seen by championing subjects that you love. So find something and dive in. I really feel like old Uncle Tim here telling you the stuff, but actually these things work. I promise. Another one, and this is something that a lot of developers struggle with. Failure doesn't actually exist. We just iterate and iterate until we get it done. Like half my career, I worked on a campaign website for a video game, or I worked on a website that sold lipsticks or whatever. If there's a mistake in there, you do another release, you iterate, it's fixed. It's all good. It's not like you're coding heart rate monitors, right? Mostly not. And so you just need to accept that you're not failing, but you're just moving down the process, getting stuff out. Um, Take decisions on intuition and ask for forgiveness later. If you are championing a subject, for example, and you really know as much as you can about it and you really love working on it, you will start to realize what has to work in your project and what not. Especially as your leader is great and they give you all this responsibility and the freedom to choose things, right? And you are now responsible for that chunk of work. You will know what this decision to make based on the overview that you just got, right? See how everything fills in. It's a responsibility, it's the overview, it's the ability to grow. All that stuff gives you great intuition. So to all my teams I've ever worked with, I said, if you want to do something and change the way you code it, or change the way you release, or do anything of process, or change your LLM, whatever, you do it. I don't care. I know you know what you're doing, so you just do it. And then if it goes wrong, then you just ask for forgiveness. And I think in these 15 years, I might have, well, of course, I was not a leader for all that time. But I think I've had someone ask for forgiveness maybe 2 times. So if you set it up right, it will just work. Right. And so lastly, make sure you have helicopter view. And I have a little bit more slides about what helicopter view actually is, because this might be one of the more important parts of being an individual contributor in a team. So helicopter view is basically that you can step back and look at what is in front of you, get an overview of what you're dealing with, right? And so that really works on the macro level, but also on the micro level. And so let's say your customer or product owner makes a decision about something that for you as a developer is like super stupid. I can guarantee you that's going to happen a few times. And so if you actually have helicopter view, you can actually kind of figure out, why did this customer choose to do this super weird thing? But the moment you know why, when you have overview, it's a lot easier to actually argue with this person. Because if you don't have an overview of what they're doing, where they're coming from, what the business goals are, what their constraints are in a project, and you just go there as a mad developer and say, I don't like this. I don't want this stuff. Like, why are you so stupid? Like, I've heard developers say that to like customers. Like, that's a stupid decision. Well, clearly that's not going to get you anywhere, right? But once you understand why they made that decision, and your boss can help you with that if they're a good boss, you will argue in such a different way. And it makes you grow. It shows that you are more senior than you might, look like. Right. So it really helps with strategic decisions to have overview of why people do the things that they do. But when you look at the micro, it also works, because think about this. Let's say you have a bug in your code. Well, you probably have an idea kind of where that came from. And so you can potentially just say, I think it's this. You just dive in and try and change something, but then it's still broken. Well, that's doing it without helicopter view. If you actually have helicopter view over your code base, what you'll do is figure out all the layers of where the bug can originate, and you start peeling away these layers and then seeing, okay, I remove this layer. Is it still happening? Yes. I remove another layer, still happening. Oh, that's the layer where it's happening. Well, inside that layer, let me remove a few things just to see where this actual thing starts happening, and then you fix the bug. And so you have done that now, having overview of all these parts that are moving, right? And so the more senior you get, the better you get at that. And so this essentially will make you go from, hey, Tim, I fixed the bug, or to, hey, Tim, I fixed a bug, right? A junior will say, I just fixed it. A senior person will say, I fixed a bug in this context based on whatever this code is doing, right? And so this helicopter view helps you so much with like even writing code. But also, if you have to add a system prompt to your agent, figure out what you do to make that agent behave a certain way. And understanding the layers is really important, right? And so next to that, and we talked about that a little bit before, it helps you to understand how you influence or influence your actions, how they influence others. right? Like when I've had it before where I would be, as a leader, being called into the office of some CEO of some huge company just to shout at me because some graph looked red rather than green. And so we have to realize that the CEOs have hundreds of meetings. They can only look at a graph and say, I'm happy or not, let's move. And if they're not happy, they have to take an action. If they're happy, they don't care. Right? It's really hard for them, especially with all these big web projects going on. And so if three of my developers didn't put their working status in the right order, that chart looks red. And now I have to go there and then stop the operation and say, hey guys, what's happening? Why are you not doing your work? If you actually understand the influence that you have to just update one thing, it's such a different experience, right? And so there's many examples here, but time is flying. So let's just move on to some other parts still. So as a team, by the way, look at these outfits. Like, why would they choose this? Anyways, there are a few things you can do as a team together to then also become more successful, right? So the most important is to act like one team, even across offices, even when people are actually remote, and go low context. And low context is super important. We'll talk about that in a sec, right? What is really easy to do and has huge impact is set up a definition of ready. So what that means is before you start working on something, there is a list of checkboxes. And when all these checkboxes are set, only then you start the work. We are ready to go. So with that, you can also do a definition of done. So what are all the things you need to always do for every piece of work? When you have a definition of ready or done, you can use that as a weapon. Because if your customer or client says, I want to do this thing, and then you look at the maturity of that list, how many checkboxes are checked? If we have one or two missing checkboxes, you're just not going to start as a team. Like, I don't have enough information. I know you're going to change this on me. I know we're going to spend too much time. Mature this story, then we can check the checkboxes, then we start. As a team, this is very valuable if you stick to it. Of course, you're going to be flexible where you can, but in the base, this is very important, right? And so we talked about this a little bit before. Like, if you're in an agile working situation, when you say, for this sprint, this is the stuff that we're going to work on, you commit to that, right? That's a commitment. If you cannot make that commitment because it's too much work or it's too unclear, the definition of ready is not checked, or you don't know what you have to do for certain things, you just don't start. It's that simple. Just don't do it, right? And of course, you cannot always say no, but again, in the base, you can actually keep this strategy and discuss it together, right? And so another one is also make sure that nobody influences that scrum team that you have from the outside while you're already working on something. Because when you are in a sprint, you committed to saying, this is what we're doing. And so if somebody comes in and changes that, suddenly you're not on time. And that whole chain of events with the red screens and whatever leadership starts to, bark at you, make sure that just doesn't happen. Don't let somebody influence you or sprint or your scope of work at that moment. And I know this is hard and you will make mistakes there. I made many, but you'll learn over time to try and protect each other there. Right. And so social interactions are very, very important. I wrote drink all the drinks. If you don't drink, you don't do that. But this is just whatever. What I meant by it is don't do all those like group activities with holding hands and games and all that stuff. Just put people in a room. And if they want to drink, they do. Otherwise, they don't. And they just have fun. It's very important that it works. Right. And so understand cultural differences. We'll get there in a sec. That is there's potentially 5 more hours we can talk about this, but we won't. But there are always cultural differences, even between privilege and genders, but also between how you grew up, how you learn to convince, how you learn to give feedback. There's a bunch of stuff there. And so I found a bunch of fun images from the 90s, from Star Trek. And look at how bad, like how awkward can you be? But these are team images. Like, look at like this backdrop. It's so bad. Anyways, let's talk about mm, those cultural differences, because that's basically a talk track on its own. There's books written about this, but we keep it short because I want you to understand. If you go into business now, you're not going to be only working with American colleagues. You're going to work, and even in the US, between states, there's so much difference in how people act. It's really important to figure that out, right? So understand low context versus high context. So let's talk about that one for a sec. Low context is the country I'm from. If you say something to me, I will take it exactly like that. No context around. If you say you feel upset, you're upset, done. And if you're upset, but you don't say you're upset, I think you're not upset. That's low context, right? And high context is much different. It's basically if you have a certain history together, if you know the context around the situation, you're kind of more able to guess how somebody might feel, even if they don't say it. So when you look at the spectrum of directness versus not directness, or low context versus high context, is the Netherlands, where I'm from, we are zero point 0, the lowest context you can get. We take everything literally. When you then go to the other opposite is Japan, which is extremely high context. So if you ask people to grab their phone and do a selfie, a Dutch person will just, and an American is very close actually, you will just take a picture of you, right? But when you ask someone in Japan to make a selfie, they will sit back in their room and the picture is taken from far away because everything in their room defines them. Super high context. So all these guitars, all the things, the plant is in a certain way because you like that type of plant. Like it's like everything defines you. And so that's much higher in context. So people will also communicate much differently, right? For example, even between the Netherlands and Spain, which there's only, I don't know, a few thousand miles in between, it's not much. It's a completely different thing. For example, I would help organize a conference in Barcelona. As a Dutch person, I ask, do you have enough chairs for the people that are visiting? And after the phone call, because they said, of course, yes. Then after the phone call, I send an email with a bunch of items that we discussed. And again, do you have enough chairs? Are you sure? And so this person in Spain was so upset with me because, of course, they have enough chairs. Isn't it obvious if you do a conference, you're going to have enough chairs? They are much higher context than me. So they took from context, there's a conference, there's going to be this many people, it's going to be in a room. Of course, we're going to have chairs. Why would we even discuss the fact that there are chairs? I already know. And so, but for me, a Dutch person, we have to highlight that. And I have to send them an email with all the checkboxes after. And so for them, um, that's actually a very different thing. They think I don't trust them when I send the list of the stuff we discussed because they already got it. And so, Jacob, you're totally right. USA versus British, man, it's so different. It's incredible. And so, in my country, I would just say you look like shit, and they would just take it, no problem, right? And so if you take that example of, are you all right, and you take that to Japan or to India or much more south or east, they would actually say, rather than asking, are you all right, they would say, yesterday you looked great, or yesterday you were very happy. And so you see how high that context is. Yesterday you were happy, so perhaps today I might not be happy, or blah 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 blah, whole story, right? And so it's incredibly different. It's very important that when you know these differences, use them, right? Because it's very hard. Okay, so there's many more. Different cultures give feedback very, very differently. Where, um, like, how can I say this? Like in my country, we just say something is bad. If there's a spelling mistake, we'll just point it out and say, yeah, that's kind of silly, let's fix it. But then we fix it and there's no hard feelings. But one time I had a friend, she was from London, and she was pitching to me what she was working on for a certain campaign for a high fancy customer. And I, as my in my Dutch self, said, it's kind of weird. I don't really get it. and she was extremely upset, but wasn't able to show it because she's from the UK, right? And I saw she was upset, right? And so me as a Dutch person, I would just ask her, why are you upset? Which made it way worse for her because she would never say why she's upset. And then we just talked about it because I'm just a rude Dutch person. And then she told me later, in the UK, I would not have spoken to you for 2 weeks and it would have kind of fizzled out and it would just be something in our history. And then she said, but you with the Dutch style, we just solved it in 2 minutes and everybody's happy again. Imagine how different this is and how different feedback actually works. I have one other story where I worked in Paris, but we also had an office in New York. And all these guys from Paris, they were mainly designers, they really wanted to go to New York because we had really cool customers there. And so, of course, we arrange that people can go. But like when you give feedback, like I had my New York counterparts say to me, like, what are you sending to me? They don't understand shit. Sorry for the words. I'm European. I might be able to get away with it. But like they have like this, like they don't get us at all. Because in France, we are not that direct. There we're actually kind of really nice and familiar and kind of um, official. But the moment it is time for feedback, let's say your yearly feedback round in work, right? They don't say stuff you did right because it's obvious, high context, right? You know what you did right. But if you did it wrong, or if you did something wrong, only in that context of feedback, they will highlight it and talk about it for like 30 minutes. So that's a thing in France. But in New York, it's really, really different. Oh, Mark, you're totally right. When I watched that last night, that was so fun. That is exactly how this works. Anyways, I'll go back to in New York. If you give feedback in New York, you say 3 or 4 great things, and in between there might be one slight thing that you don't like, but you don't really highlight it. It's all like, that was awesome, that was awesome, that was awesome, great job. You didn't do that right, but oh, that was awesome. And so all these French people that went to New York, they got that feedback. They're like, I'm the best ever. I've never been this good in my job ever. And then these managers from New York, they were like, but I gave them like that one point of feedback and they didn't even listen to it. They didn't even change nothing. And so I had to explain to the folks in New York that we spent 30 minutes on that bad point and we never talk about the good points. And so you can see how these cultures are so different because in the US, especially on like that east side, people are quite direct. They can say anything to you in a coffee shop. They're polite but super direct. But when it comes to feedback, they're not direct at all. So yes, feedback is a special. And there's also differences in how people persuade, right? I want to do this because ABC, right? Or when you give a pitch to a customer or anything like that. There's actually huge differences here. And so there's this thing called principles first versus application first. And in the US and where I'm from, we're generally application first. If you're going to go to a Spanish lesson or a French lesson in school, the first lesson, your teacher will just speak in French or Spanish. And then you will just have to kind of catch on for fun, read like, and then you learn a little bit and then you practice and you learn a little bit. So the learning, the rules, and the practice happen at the same time, right? That's application first. That's how I do everything because that's my culture. But then there's many other countries, like more to the south, like all of South America, but also all of South of Europe, but also places like Russia and Eastern Europe. They're all principles first, which means this is the book of all the rules. You learn all the rules of what it means to speak Spanish. You learn every rule. Once you've known all the rules, once you've read the book, you've done the test, then you start practicing with speaking. You see how different this is? But just that thing of first knowing all the rules and then practicing versus practicing at the same time as the rules and just failing until you're not failing anymore, those two things actually come up when you're in your adult life and you have to persuade somebody. Because as it turns out, when you want to pitch to someone and your principles first, you will talk for an hour about your research, how all the stuff that you know, and then your final slide is the conclusion. I told you this whole story. This is what you have to do. But imagine you're saying that to somebody who's application first. They have to wait for 1 hour to actually see your conclusion. Somebody whose application first just says in the first slide, this is what we're doing. Maybe it's 5 minutes of talking about like, hey, it's a little bit of information here. And then people might ask questions and then they go deeper. So that's like this pitch decks where there's an appendix. But then if your principles first, your pitch deck is like 200 slides. There's no appendixes. Nobody cares. I want to show you everything. And so if you put those people in the same room, they're not going to listen to each other whatsoever. They're just going to make each other very uncomfortable. And this also goes like you have that part, but there's also these different kind of contexts in how your culture, shows you yourself. Like, how do I explain this? Like, I've had it before where my British colleagues had to pitch to a German car maker. So we were building their website to do better sales, right? And so what you actually notice is that people from the UK would come up to the stage and make a self-deprecating joke, just kind of funny, putting themselves down. But then their presentation is amazing. So they kind of just go down and then up really high. Best presentation you've ever seen. But when you're a German person and you want to start pitching, what you do is you say, I have this diploma, I have this research, I have this history. Based on this, I'm going to dazzle you now. So it all kind of just stays like that. So imagine if an English person is going to pitch to a German car maker and start with a self-deprecating joke. The first 2 minutes, this German car maker is like, why would I ever let you make this website? I don't know what your qualifications are, right? So there's so much there that you need to know. It's so important. And so you just need to find the map of how everybody works in your team and communicate that way. Just know who you're talking to, right? And also, there's also this one last one, because I know we're almost at time. Understand how different cultures trust. It's also a pretty big one, right? Because some cultures, like mine and the US, is quite task-based. If you have a great resume and if you have done great projects in the past, there's kind of some sort of default of like, I can probably trust this person because they did 15 years of ABC. But in other cultures, like where I live in France, it's completely relationship driven. So if I went to kindergarten with some other CEO, and then, we went to university together, we will shake a hand and make a deal. The trust is there because we know each other for so long. So when an American tries to pitch in France, think Emily in Paris or whatever you want, if you think you're going to get trust based on your own career, forget it. It's going to take you 3 years to make a relationship so they trust you, right? And so it's really different between different countries. And so all these things together will make you fail instantly if you don't know who's in your team, right? And this goes back to like this overview thing, know what people do, but also where they're from, how they think, because it's much bigger than you think. And actually the goal would be to just leave no room for interpretation. Because, for example, I had in my team somebody from Portugal and somebody from Brazil. They speak the same language, somewhat. They kind of act similarly, but their countries are far enough apart so that they're actually not the same. They actually act differently, but they seem to be the same. They seem to think they work the same, but they don't. And so if you don't address that, they will start failing at one point, right? So we have to find a way to have no room for this interpretation, because certain countries are really good in assuming what somebody means because they're high context. They have learned their whole life, this is probably what that person means because of A, B, C, D, or to C even, right? But people from my country will never, ever get that. And people in the US are kind of in the middle, right? And so assumption is literally the mother of all F-ups, right? If you assume wrong and you work for 3 months and it's a wrong assumption, that's pretty bad. Actually, Joanne, probably. We'll talk about that in a sec, because I think there's a lot you can ask an AI about these different cultures and how it would work. So what you have to do, and this can be a rough process, or when you talk about it beforehand, it's fine. You have to go explicit and low context, which is not easy for everybody, but for the folks in this room, it's probably quite doable. Um, make sure that if you do something and you say something about it, that it's only that thing. There's no extra context. People have to guess, right? Make sure you go low context. You know about that chairs question that I had for the conference in Barcelona, and the fact that I sent a list of items I wanted done for that conference. Do that, and just explain to the people that are more high context that not everybody gets that. And if you're high context, nothing is written. So if something goes wrong, there's no finger pointing and nobody is responsible. If you're low context, everything is written, everything is explicit, and people will be able to find back where something went wrong. You just need to have that. If you work on a project that's $12 million worth of effort and something goes wrong and you have no paper trail, you are just going to be screwed. You know what I mean? So, concluding, we're filling our time pretty well here. Um, as a leader, make people feel responsible for their results. As a developer or as an individual contributor, know yourself, the autonomy, mastery, purpose thing, and have this really good overview. And then we have, as a team, use Agile as a tool and go load context in all the things. And then you get this because it's pretty much impossible your first try. It's going to take you a sec. And with that, that's my final slide. I see there's a pretty big question here. Let's have a look.
Yeah, there is one
Oh, Jacob, let's
from
see.
Jacob.
Go on.
Let's go first with the first question from Joanne.
Yeah, of course. So
Uh, yeah,
go
sorry.
on.
Hold on. The question is, can today's AI tools help us learn about the kinds of cultural differences you were talking about earlier on your presentation?
Yes, because as it turns out, there's a few very clever people that wrote books about this. And so, of course, your AI has read that book. And so there's one book. Oh, I forgot the author, but it's one of my favorite books, but I haven't read it for a while. But this is called The Culture Map. And so in this book, they outline all that stuff I was talking about. I'm not sure if I can still get there. No, my slides don't want to go back. Wait, where were we? This. But rather than the four, there's actually eight, but I didn't want to go too deep. There are eight of those things, and they're between cultures. You can map those on how cultures react, right? So if I'm in the room with someone from the south of the US and somebody from Denmark and somebody from China, there's a mapping in how you have to talk. And that book outlines it like perfectly. It's incredible. And so if you just ask AI about the culture map and the markup of your team, your AI will just help you. They will just say, oh, do this, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Because it must have read that book. I use it that way as well. You can literally just print that mapping and just say, go. Joanne, I hope that answers your question. Feel free to come off mic, off mute and talk about it.
Um,
Or not, it's all good. We can also go to the next.
all right. So hopefully that answers Joanne's question. So Jacob did drop a huge
Yeah, that's a
list.
proper question, let's say.
All right. Right. So basically, the question that we do have here is: have you been involved in MVPs? I know all teams are different, but it's wild to me just how minimum devs work to achieve milestones markers.
So an MVP is actually a really important part of projects. The only problem is quite often that MVPs end up to be the production, and then you're in trouble, right? Because MVPs keep growing. I had one time, and you're not going to believe this. MVP means minimum viable product. So you do the minimum possible for something that's just good enough for your product owner or your customer or whatever. The thing is, I had this customer that said, oh, for the last year, I thought MVP means maximum viable product. So they've been pushing as much as possible in that MVP. And we were just complaining. It's like, if you want to do an MVP for this product or this website or this app, this is what that looks like, and they kept adding stuff. And so you really have to find a way with the team, like what is our definition of done, of what is, if you build a feature, what does it need to have? For an MVP, probably not unit test, right? But you probably do need high accessibility rules, so people that have like one arm or are blind can still use that thing. And so it's really about what is the quality level of what you want as a team compared to what your customer is asking, and then fill out what an MVP is. And I don't think I've ever made an MVP that's the same. So, Jacob, my question is, sorry, it depends. That's not easy. I hope that answers the question. I know you're that, like, it's quite a long answer, but feel free if you have more questions like this, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can just chat. That might help.
All right. So let's move forward with another one from Isaiah. How can a junior dev contribute without feeling intimidated by more senior devs? Just
Um,
on your opinion.
yeah, that's a really good one. And if you have a really good team, I would say a senior dev should never be intimidating to a junior dev, because everybody was a junior dev once. And being junior is quite different, right? If you like, I don't know, Shaya, how you see senior devs. They might be an incredible coder, but not really a great communicator. And to me, they're junior. You might be an incredible communicator, but not that great at coding yet. To me, you're going to be senior much faster. And so it's a whole package. It's a wide ranging thing. If you have overview of what people are doing and you feel responsible, even if you get small tasks and you're always done on time, to me, you're much more senior than some 10x developer who's basically an asshole and just tells people off and just goes in his room and codes his own thing and comes back with something brilliant. We don't want brilliant assholes in teams. So what you can do without feeling intimidated, it's really hard because, let's be honest, I'm a white dude with a beard. My privilege is different, so I might not always feel that as much. And so I would say, as a junior dev, just take a subject that you love and champion it and try to see if you can get really good at it. And try to get this overview, because what happens with junior devs is you tend to get like a task that's simpler, perhaps. And so maybe what you have to do is like update some JavaScript or add a unit test or something, and then you just commit, and suddenly something happens on the website, and you're like, oh, I've done my thing. If you understand the chain from that small thing that you changed, and then know what impacts what and what happens before it actually reaches the website, so have an or your app or whatever you do, feel like you have the overview of the architecture. And then you can actually, if you know and understand that, you can talk about that with the senior dev, right? And that means you have much more way to argue, figure things out, just ask them questions, right? I hope that works, Isaiah, because it's different for everyone. Just keep doing it, I guess. Keep working, you'll get there.
Fair point on that question, on that answer as well. So I think a lot of right now in the market, a lot of junior devs are experiencing this kind of situations. But
Oh, really?
yeah,
Hmm.
also I do think that it varies on people, the situation as well. So
Yes, sadly, always. That's the hard part.
yeah, that's
Because
the
if it's
hardest part
just
because
tech
it's not
skills,
the same with everyone.
yeah, like the thing is, if it's just tech skills, you'll eventually get there. You'll learn. But it's actually, being senior is so much wider ranging than just your tech skills, right? And so
Right.
you, anyways, there's many more, it seems.
All right. Let's move for the next question. This is from John. Do you have more resources for what to do as a leader? Please share
Oh,
any
there's
that would help.
so many books on this. Not all still work, but let's see. Um, Actually, I wanted to make this thing a book, but I never got around to it. Otherwise, that would have been a resource for you. I would say, John, like, if you do a great prompt to whatever LLM you're using, you will get a ton of information. And so, to be a good leader, I think, You will have to do a lot of the work as a leader, but also as not a leader, just to see how other people treat you that are your leaders. And I am just privileged that I came up in the time when, after the first internet bubble burst, it slowly started up again and things started moving fast. When like my first year working was like 2006 or 7, right? This was the high time of when whatever you did, it kind of just worked. I didn't go to school for this because there was no school for development. There was no tech academy. I wish there was. And so we learned just by failing. Iterate, fail, iterate, fail. And so I learned what bad leaders were, just with time. And you might just like, I was lucky because of that time frame that companies like EA Games or Nike or Chanel or Heineken had a lot of cash to just throw at agencies. So I was like 21 or 22 and I got like the biggest project in the space at that moment. And I was still junior and we failed a lot. But if you have the opportunity to do these great projects, you'll just learn under pressure. So I was lucky, but it's also wasn't the easiest because every project meant if you fail, we lose this customer, your agency will just die. Right. So there's differences here. But John, I would say just ask your AI and then work. Like just do the work as much as you can everywhere.
Got it. That's really nice input out there. I think I do have something to relate to that as a leader. As you are a leader currently with your team and all. I do have two questions for that. So, um, do you find any differences between managing an on-site team and a virtual one? Would there be like a huge difference between that?
I haven't managed an on-site team in a while.
That
Um,
would take a while then.
well, that's what a lot of people have. Like to me, if the team is on site, I still give them all the freedom that they want, to take time. And I always tell people, when you go and grab a coffee with someone, or you see, like, this is the benefit of being in an office. You can see senior leader people or people that you admire just walk around and talk. You can just stand next to them and listen. You have to do that. And so managing teams like that, I think it was actually probably better in office because also these cultural differences are so much more clear. I could just see on somebody's face when they're low context versus high context and they chat. And so you can help them much faster. You have much more synergy together. Um, than the other, like, and if it's somebody who's like not in office, there's two differences, right? You can be in office, like basically remote, but like it's in an office, right? We can have async or sync remote. Sync remote is probably the worst thing you can do because you are in an office essentially. You have to follow all the meetings with all the starting times, all the ending times. This is your break. You have to be active during these hours. We're checking your mouse cursor, right?
Yeah,
That's basically being in office without the benefit of being in office. It's horrible. So
it is.
if you can choose, either go in office or for a few days, right?
Mhm.
Or go remote but asynchronous. So you get to do your time. You just have to be there for meetings. That's it. And so that's the moment that starts to happen. I just give people all the freedom. I fully trust them. And if they don't do their work, then I have learned, and then we talk about it, and then we gain that trust together. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I answered your question, but there's so many differences.
Yeah, basically, you did answer. You just gave out the different the pros and cons of each part. So it's also good at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I would say if you're now going into the workforce, try to have some sort of hybrid, because this is interesting, right? I really miss being in office right now, and I haven't been working in office for like 7 8 years now because I am Dutch. So my directness when I speak is very direct. My culture is like super low context, super harsh. That's just how we are. And so when I moved to this other country where I am now, I had to learn from people in an office that that behavior just doesn't fly. You have to change how you speak to people. I made, you know, creative people that were the most amazing designers ever for the most fancy brands cry with one comment. Like, so you learn in person, don't do this. Adapt to your situation. The thing is, now I'm at home and I only talk like this over a camera, and all my Dutch tendencies are coming back. Slowly but surely, I'm getting ruder again because I'm not culture checked by people that I actually can touch. I'm not touching them, but you know what I mean, right? And so that's a really interesting thing to see for me now. I actually have to take that into account
Mhm.
when I speak to people, that I'm gonna be just super direct like I was when I was in Amsterdam. And so I wish I was in office, actually. Would be
So
better for me.
yeah, actually, that brings to my other question. Since we already mentioned the the different cultures, and at the same time, you being Dutch as being straight to the point kind of person. So
Yes.
was it really? No, was it really? Was it, or did you find it very challenging to understand um feedbacks from people because of your you are a low context kind of
Oh
person. You
yes.
say what you want. I mean, not you say what you want, but you say what you mean, like literally itself.
We also say what we want. We just
Yeah.
like that has worked for me pretty well because we are, as Dutch people, we are not that, we don't have that super long sentences. We're kind of short.
Mhm.
And if you notice, the CEO is also pretty short. They don't really say that much. They need 30 seconds, they're done. If you
Yeah.
don't make your point in 30 seconds, they're out. They have the next meeting. And so that worked actually well for me. But I've had it so often when people gave me like proper feedback and I didn't get one word of that feedback because they didn't actually say it. Like I've had meetings, like I wish I could, say what the customers were that I worked for, but this is going to be recorded and put on YouTube. So I will not. But with these super fancy customers, and we had meetings with like 20 people, workshops and stuff, and we would present our work to them. And like we're talking about millions of dollars in campaign stuff. And I would then in the end say to my colleagues, "Oh, that was a pretty good meeting, wasn't it?" And they're like, "Dude, no, that was horrible." It's like, wow, they were all so polite. They were saying the right things. And so I could just not pick up that slight difference in the context that for them was slightly higher. And based on that context, what they're saying was actually horrible. But I just could not see that extra context. I could not see the history they had with this customer versus the agency and all the 20,000 meetings they had before that all came together by them actually becoming more nice to us meant it was pretty bad. Welcome to different cultures. I could not get one thing. So that took me a few good years to get there.
Took few good
So
years.
yeah, hard.
Well, I think we are all going to experience that somehow in some
Oh, I'm
point
sure.
of our life. Well, yeah. I guess that's my question. So if other people here, other attendees still have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. But if not, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tim for being our speaker for today. And I really do appreciate that you're here with us. And at the same time, thank you again. We hope to have you again for maybe in January if you're
Sure.
free.
I love this stuff. Like I've done things like this for students. I really, really enjoy it because we didn't have that much interaction now with the students, but
Mhm.
people tend to be so much more of an out of the box thinker than me, an old dude who's built websites or apps. Like you guys are going to build such better stuff than I've done because with your all the AI and stuff. So that this is exciting. I'm happy to be back.
All right. That's good to know. So, yeah, thank you again for joining us. And to our attendees, thank you for joining this week's Tech Talk. And again, be sure to tune in next week for another live session. The event details are already posted on our Meetup account, so don't forget to RSVP and don't forget to connect with Tim on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's my platform of choice. Or you can just go to my website. But feel free to ask me more questions. I'm open to all this.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for me. Remember, more live tech talks are coming this November as well. Before, yeah, it's October, right? Yeah, November. I'm already lost at the months
It's
leading.
Christmas. It's almost Christmas. We're good.
Almost Christmas, definitely. So yeah, see you guys next week, same time, same channel. We really do appreciate you having you, Tim. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And it's to Tim as well. It's pretty late with you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you guys
All
so
right,
much. See you
cheers.
next week. Bye bye.